for because they're looking for somebody that is lacking something. And how did these predators find out what's lacking? Well, they're pretty good at telling who is prime target for getting hooked into their very, very horrific system. And so what they'll do is they will maybe follow them on Facebook. And remember, social media is a prime target for these people because it is social media. So they're looking for breadcrumb trails for evidence that the person is hurting. Maybe the daughter or the son is complaining about mom having kicked them out of the house, or maybe they're saying that they just broke up with their boyfriend, and maybe they're saying that they maybe they're wearing provocative clothes, or maybe even exchanging naked pictures with other people. And so it's a very tragic situation here, because when people are in that stage of life, they feel invulnerable, and they don't really sense that there's any kind of danger around them, because they're thinking that there's this level of anonymity behind that computer. However, it only takes a little bit of baiting them in some cases to get them to actually show up. And so what they might do is engage with them in conversation and become their new BFF. So little Sally is chatting it up with Charlie, and Charlie could be a 65-year-old man, could be a 48-year-old man, could be a 23-year-old young man. It doesn't matter, because he could post any picture of himself that he wants. So the young lady is thinking that he's talking to one person, and he's really not talking to that other person. And then that person might engage with her and show signs of empathy. I'm so sorry you're not getting along with your mother and your father. I'm so, you don't deserve this. You deserve better. And then she'll open up more and more and more. And pretty soon a meeting place will be arranged. And sometimes that meeting takes place. I've heard instances where that meeting might take place even late in the night, or in the middle of the night, where they sneak out and they think that they're going to have a little rendezvous with this person that they've been chatting it up with for weeks or months, and then they end up maybe even sitting in their car, and then that person might even drive them off and act as if they're their savior. It's just a really, really sad situation. And then there is a grooming process. And the grooming process is very, very sad, because the person might offer that young woman or man dinner. That person might offer that young man or woman presents and flowers, and act as if they are their possible love of their life. And these people who are hurting and have a hole in the soul, as I like to say it, are just really soaking in this attention. And then they may love bomb them, just like I was talking about last episode. They may say, Sally, you are one of the most beautiful, hot women I have ever met. And Sally, I'm having these amazing feelings for you, and I know you're feeling it too. And so they may convince this person to court them, and in this courtship, they might just simply be doing that. So you see the grooming process? It's a step-by-step, very well thought out plan that is going on. And then eventually they'll have sex with the person, and as some of you know, there is a chemical in our body called oxytocin, and this oxytocin is a love bonding hormone. So now the young person starts to bond with the groomer and the predator, and then as they're bonding to the predator, they're feeling all of the feelings that they never felt before, or have hardly ever felt before: the rush, the love, the protection, the oh baby, everything will be okay, I'll take care of you. And so now they're sensing and feeling that this person is their protector. And then when they're nice and hooked, and they have no money and no place to go, and of course no job, and no skills, then the person will start having sex with them, and not only that person, but they might invite another friend or two along for the ride. And the young person might resist a little bit, but then that person might say, "Oh, baby, I thought you loved me. I thought you'd do anything for me." And the anything is this. And then it gets even rougher. So I remember one situation in which I was actually attending a seminar, and they were relating case study after case study. And in this particular case, what happened was the woman got so caught in the dolphin's net, so to speak, of this. And so in order to really devalue and destroy the spirit, they are then gang raped. Okay? And once they are gang raped, that's it. They are now part of a no thing. They have no spirit left. They are now the bitches of the predators, and then they can brand them, and they can make them part of their group, and then they can collect them, and they can sell them out to the customers. And these customers are, of course, people who also have a hole in the soul because they're addicted to porn, they're addicted to drugs, sex, and rock and roll. And to add another layer to this, many of these young people are then involved with using drugs and getting high with their predator. And as they're getting high with their predator, they're getting addicted to the drug. And so in order to get more drug, the carrot is waved in front of them, and they're told that they have to do this and that, or else they will not have the drug. And nobody wants to go through withdrawal. So they'll start performing heinous acts, and they will tolerate more and more horrific treatment to the point where many of them hemorrhage to death in the sex act, because some of them have to perform sex 10, 20 times a day, and some of them are beaten to a pulp by some of the so-called customers, and if not the customer, the pimp or the predator will, because they're punishing them if they don't stay in line. And then this system begins to mushroom and grow. So such a system gone wrong. And we're going to mind map it in a minute. And if anyone wants to call in and ask questions, please do. But you can kind of see where this is going. And this goes into a bigger mushroom cloud of now the primary person is asked to recruit other people into this clan. And once they start becoming the primary, they start the grooming process of other young people, and then it's kind of like a very, very sick mass marketing. So as I said, I'm going to mind map this because I think it's important for you to understand the backdrop to all of this. So I'm going to get a little bit into, so who are these people? What happened at the causal level that people are interconnecting, if that is, as I'm being somewhat facetious, they're actually vampiring these young people. And why are they vampiring? Because many of you have heard episodes on my narcissism shows, and you understand that people who have holes in the soul, people who do not have the basic emotional ingredients necessary for life, go back to panel 1, please. Thank you. And if they don't have a lot of light. So what they need is they need to feed off of other people. And this feeding process is endless because the hole in the soul is so deep. Can you imagine a bucket with a hole on the bottom? Now, that hole on the bottom is always going to be leaking. So no matter what you put in there, it's not going to stick. So you've got 10 women, 20 women. Now the women are doing sadomasochistic acts, and they're doing all kinds of acts, and even that is not enough. And so the ante is constantly being upped. And and so let's go to the definition of antisocial personality disorder and the panel 1 wound of the predator. So what is antisocial personality disorder? It is a personality disorder characterized by a long-term pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others. Okay? So a low moral sense or conscience is often apparent, as well as a history of crime, legal problems, or impulsive and aggressive behavior. Why do children turn out that way? Well, because, back to the cause, they are not given those emotional ingredients, and probably they are also treated that way. Now, there's a genetic component that is oftentimes discussed alongside this, and as I've mentioned on several episodes, nature and nurture interact with each other. And so genetics is the setting up of the situation, and the nature is the pulling the gun. So you set the gun up to fire off, and nature will tip it in a certain direction. So for those of you who are wondering, nature, nurture, I don't really have a great answer for that, and I think they're still trying to figure it out. In any case, if naturally someone is inclined in this direction and then they're abused and they're neglected and raped and so on, then it wouldn't be too surprising that they would go in the direction of devolving into antisocial personality disorder. So prior to antisocial personality disorder, the children will be already acting out at an early age, and some very, very bad signs of an antisocial personality disorder in making is if your child is killing little animals, pulling the feet off of mice and blowing up cats and so on. If this is happening, and I know it's really gross, and so, this is what the show is about. It's pretty raw, and we are going deeper, and we are going very much into the truth of what's going on this planet, because this is a severe situation of human disconnect. And remember, when we are disconnected from, we hurt. And when we're hurt, we start, in this case, we start acting out, and we start displacing and projecting our pain on other creatures, animals and children alike. So if you'd like to see this from the point of view of the injury gone in such a direction that now the child is developing conduct disorder. They're robbing, they're stealing, they're hurting, they're setting fires, and then they're also acting out in other ways, maybe in school. They're talking back to teachers and so on. And then the child starts developing criminal types of behaviors and gets in trouble with the law. These are signs that your child is in trouble, and these are signs that you as the parent have to pay attention to and not ignore, and understand that early intervention is the best course of making sure that this dis-ease, as I like to call it, doesn't take root in the child and really fracture this person's sense of being and life permanently. So what are we supposed to do about this? Well, what we're supposed to do about this is learn that we as a human race have to pay attention to how we treat our children. We have to nurture the children in order for them to have a chance at becoming securely attached and balanced, and people that are going to give light and be contributors to the planet. So in the case of the antisocial personality disorder, you can see that it starts with the conduct disorder. It can go into this oppositional type of behavior, and eventually, if it keeps going, it can go into full-blown antisocial personality disorder. So if you look at panel number 2, you can see that the reaction to babies who are going into a spiral now because they're not being nurtured. Their reaction is that they're scared. They can't fight. They can't flee. Their hearts are pounding. And then at this primitive level already, they may begin to already shut down and go into a state of learned helplessness. Martin Seligman talks about the state of learned helplessness where there's nothing that they can do about the situation, so that they stop crying. And after a while, they even stop feeling. And that's a problem, because when a person lacks empathy, there's a huge problem with that. They don't feel for the other human beings. So that means that they can rape, they can kill, they can do all kinds of heinous things and not really feel anything about this. So it's a real issue. This lack of empathy is a real issue. And then as they continue to shut down and react as in this primitive state of being, they then start to encode the beliefs about themselves, about the world. And pretty soon they start encoding things like, the world is just this horrific place anyway. Nobody cares. Nobody loves me. I'm going to get killed anyway. Maybe the person's been part of a gang. Maybe the father figure is gone, and so they chose to be in a gang to get some kind of a family feeling around them. And then they think that, well, this is the world, so I might as well use the world because the world's been using me. So again, this is a call-in show, and I know this is a pretty gruesome topic, and I'd like to take some calls if anybody wants to share their experience, and please do so anonymously if you're more comfortable doing that. 323-843-2826. We're talking about sex and drug trafficking, a multi-billion-dollar industry, an industry that cuts across cultural lines. This is happening all over the world. It is epidemic. It is a huge business. There is a side of the web which is called the dark web, and in this dark web are really, really dark uploads or downloads of pornography, of advertisements for some pretty gruesome acts. And there's just this whole other layer of world that is so very, very dark and dismal. And it's very hard to wrap your head around it if you're living in a pretty okay environment. It's hard to imagine that there's this going on in the world, and it is going on in the world. So what do you think people are recording in their core belief? Now we're mind mapping the predator right now. So the predator is concluding that nothing matters. He doesn't matter. Life doesn't matter. Life is a value. The value of life doesn't matter. No morals, no ethics, no life values, no value for human being. So then this allows the person to objectify the other. And once that sense of it's okay to objectify the person develops, then it's just okay to use people as products. And so that's the 1, 2, 3, panel 1, 2, 3 of the predator. Now, what about the person who is the victim of all of this? So remember, this victim in panel 1 was probably neglected. He or she is hungry for love. He or she is downtrodden, maybe beaten, abused, maybe violated. The boundaries are violated. Maybe there's alcoholism or drug addiction in the home. So there's just a lot of hurting and tension and disconnect in the home environment. And then as the baby child develops, their reaction to the wound is similar in that they don't feel that they're safe, they're scared. And then what they start concluding in panel 3 about themselves is that they're worthless, and that the only way they can be worth anything is by performing and pleasing. So remember all the episodes on people pleasing. So here's another version of, if I please people, if I please my man, then I will be loved. If I please my man, I will be protected. And so you can see how the foundation has been laid down, how emotionally the table was set, so to speak, from the very beginning in childhood. And all the predator has to do is just kind of plug into that system gone wrong on the family level and pick it up from there and act as if they're going to clean up all the mess, solve that child's or adolescent's or young adult's problems. And they're just hand in glove, two pieces fitting together in a very, very pathological way. So you can see that this grooming business is a very, very psychologically well thought out. People who are engaged in this for a living, if you want to call it that, are very, very well educated psychologically. They understand how to choose these people. They understand that in order to get the best victim, so to speak, they have to test the person. And so with all the information we just talked about, you could see that they're going to look at them on the web, their Facebook page. They're going to size them up in terms of vulnerability. They're going to befriend them and get a lot of information out of them so that they can know how to manipulate them. They'll see how they're going to approach it, whether the young lady or the young man needs a place to stay, or maybe they need food, or maybe they want drugs, or maybe they want love, and they'll figure it out pretty quickly. So one of the things that I learned from my clients is that they will look for lack of eye contact, which I find really interesting, because when they're looking in the eyes of the potential victim, what they're looking for is a person who looks away. And if the person looks away, they're sizing that person up as the shy type, the vulnerable type. And if that person looks that person square in the eye, then they may bypass that person. They may also look for other signs. Maybe that person doesn't have a purse on them, which means that maybe they don't have any money on them. Maybe their nails are all dirty and ungroomed. Maybe their clothes are a little bit ungroomed. And so these are the people who are oftentimes homeless. They're runaways, children that have left their home environment because mom and dad are fighting, they're being beaten, they're being verbally abused, or combination of that. And so where do they go? They go to the streets. And then when they're on the streets, they are even more vulnerable. So now this gets into other people who are vulnerable to these predators are obviously homeless people and the newly homeless, because the newly homeless are still used to nice warm bed and nice warm food, and they are not used to being homeless, so they are primed for someone who's going to offer them a great meal and offer them manicure and pedicure and nice clothes and so on and so forth. So can you now begin to see how the predator and the victim basically have a very common injury, in that they both have a hole in the soul, both of them. So the hole in the soul is expressed differently. In one case, there's no empathy, and they've already emotionally cut off from humanity, so they can objectify people. And the other is still dying for the love and the affection, and they're still experiencing feelings of sadness and abandonment and so on. And so really that person is just so very eager to please the predator. I want to talk a little bit more about the system gone wrong from a point of view of the chaos and the defenses and the breakdowns. So if you go to panel number 4 and we look at all the chaos that results from this, what's happening is that the chaos does not start from the relationship between the predator and the victim. The chaos starts in the family. The chaos starts at the causal level. So as I mentioned before, the table is set for such a horrific outcome for the victims, and the chaos is something that they cannot really deal with, because if you look at panel number 4, you could see that the 2 DNA strands are separated, and the 2 DNA strands stand for the mother and the father are the primary caregivers. And these primary caregivers, in most instances, are not together, or they're quarreling, or they themselves are falling apart so badly that they offer no structure for the children. So you could see that the children are flying off the handle. You could see the toxicity in the background as a metaphor for the toxic environment of the home environment. And so this toxicity hurls the young adult into the world at large, and just like a little animal that's lost, he or she becomes great meal for the big bad wolf. So that, remember, this just is not happening in a vacuum, and there's a whole backdrop to this. And please remember, this is a call-in show, and I really would love to hear from you. I know that my audience has excellent questions, and I always am surprised sometimes by the knowledge base of the questions. Please call in 323-843-2826. And if you're a parent, then please understand that there's a lot that you can do about this. And the most important thing that you could do about this is be there for your children. And know that it's okay to check up on your children. Just because you're checking up on your children, it doesn't mean that you're smothering them. It doesn't mean that you're helicoptering them. I'm not talking about that kind of checking up on your children. I'm talking about being interested in what kind of apps they're using, being interested in what they're doing on those chat rooms, being interested in how they're dressing and who their friends are, and checking for tattoos, because one of the very sad aspects of this sex and drug trafficking business is that they will actually brand the people in their group. And so when there is a predator, and then there is the main person, I believe they call that person the bottom. That's the first line of woman that's in the clan, who then begins to recruit other people into the clan. And so they may brand them with their own symbol to mark them as property. And if you take a look at the history of branding people, I can't help but to think back on the Holocaust, when they used to put numbers on people, or any sort of branding of people in slavery, in any kind of way of owning a human being, because that's really what it is. They claim ownership, and they deem human beings as property. So now that they're branded, it's kind of hard to wipe that thing off of your forehead, or that symbol off of your butt cheek, okay? Because they'll put branding sometimes all over the body in order to signify the ownership. And so if you're a parent, you might want to look for these things in your child. You might want to look for signs of, well, You might want to look for any kinds of signs of depression and suicidality and wanting to escape from the family. And again, if your children are behaving this way, the best intervention is prevention. And the prevention is always offering your children psychological nutrients of health, eye contact, skin contact, and later as they grow up, getting involved with them, creating a family structure that they don't want to leave, creating a family structure that is strict in some way with rules and roles and so on, but not so overly strict that that you're actually smothering the child and stopping their growth. So if you go back to panel number 5, let's look at panel number 5 and talk about defense mechanisms. The defense mechanism of the predator is that they treat others like they were treated most likely. And the primary defense mechanism is apathy. They have cut off. So in looking at how our boundaries work, well, people who cut off emotionally have locked out their heart from other people. So therefore, their internal boundary structure is that they're impenetrable by love because they've been hurt too deeply. So they have no capacity. And so the person who is the victim is very penetrable. So their boundaries are very open. And as some of you know by reading my book or watching the videos, the healthy boundary is the semi-permeable boundary where you can make distinctions between who you want to let into your life and who you don't want to let into your life. I just want to read a little bit more about the causes of psychopathology. Personality disorders are seen to be caused by a combination and an interaction, according to this article, of genetics and environmental influences. I lean more toward the environmental influences, as you know, because the genetics we cannot help. Genetically, it is the intrinsic temperamental tendencies as determined by their genetically influenced physiology and environment. It is the social and cultural experiences of a person in childhood and adolescence encompassing their family dynamics, peer influences, and social values. People with an antisocial or alcoholic parent are considered to be at higher risk. Makes sense. Look at the blueprint. So if you look at the blueprint of the people who are subject to human sex trafficking, then a lot of them come from alcoholic families. A lot of them come from families that are not intact, broken families. And then they act out because they're not obviously given any kind of structure and they're not cared for. So what do they do to act out? Fire setting, cruelty to animals during childhood. This is well linked to the development of antisocial personality. The condition is more common in males than in females and among people, obviously, who are in prison. Okay, so can you see how these dots are starting to connect? We've got the person who is the predator, who has a hole in the soul, and that person has now cut their heart out, so to speak. And then we have that other person who is more the victim, and that person is still yearning, is still hopeful that there's some love left on the planet. And so they're just looking for that love. And they're really not aware that the person who is acting as if they're loving and they're kind and connecting to them and buying them dinners and buying them flowers, as far as they're concerned, they just met the love of their life, and they're pretty darn happy about this. And so as this story unfolds and the person gets more and more hooked in, then the power differential increases and the scale begins to tip to the point where the predator is very much in full control of that individual. I want to relate some information that actually one of my patients related to me, and she told me about some terms that I was not familiar with that they call white meat, so to speak. They call them snow bunnies. Snow bunnies. So if you hear these kinds of terms being spoken by your child, you might want to look further into this. So snow bunnies are white victims of sexual predators. And black victims, I didn't know this, just was taught this, are called red bone baddies. Red bone baddies. Okay, so terms that you might want to look for, or maybe look for on the cell. A couple of other things that I wanted to talk about, which is that the digital world is a huge area of vulnerability. There are 450 million users of WeChat. Obviously, people who are on their smartphone and they're live streaming and they're on Facebook are exposing themselves and leaving traces of breadcrumb evidence that people can then pick up and use craftily and against children. So do check and see what your children are up to. Do check and see what apps they're using. And again, this is a call-in show, and I think we have a call-in. Oh, we don't have a call-in. We only have a little time left. So if you'd like to call in, please call in, because I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear your comments and thoughts. I know that this is so prevalent. There must be people out there who are listening as we speak and have been caught up in human trafficking. The number again, 323-843-2826. And if you'd like to heal from human trafficking and the PTSD that is a result of this human trafficking and the horrific outcome of this is that the self-esteem is shot. The person feels like human trash. They believe that they're garbage, literally. And this is the kind of impression, this kind of scarring leaves on people who come out of this, if they're lucky enough to come out of this. There's one particular case that I have in mind where a, quote, customer actually saved this person's life. And she was just lucky enough that the person who was the customer and not the pimp, not the predator, noticed her condition and got in a conversation with her and asked her if this is something that she enjoyed doing. And she shared with him that she didn't. And I believe he paid for a bunch of time to, quote, be with her. And then at that point, he took her out. And she was just one of those lucky people who got out. And many of these women don't, and many young men don't. And again, I want to remind everybody that this is an epidemic. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's not going to stop because people are making too much money. And it's also not going to stop because from a causal end, we as parents and as a society are grooming our humans to fall prey to this. And how are we grooming them? By not giving them the love, the nurturing, the attention, the stability to create a healthy human psyche. And when someone is walking around with a hole in the soul and coming from a family that's already falling apart in chaos and breaking down, it's impossible for them to conceive of a world of panel 789, which is interconnection, reconnection, and unity. It's impossible for them to see this world because it was never shown to them. So as far as they're concerned, panel number 789 does not exist for them. And the only thing that exists for them is the wounds, the reactions, the negative core beliefs that they carry, and then the breakdowns that they experience over and over again. So needless to say, a lot of people who are lucky to come out of this end up with venereal disease, tremendously depressed, complex PTSD, different levels of PTSD, and they desperately need treatment. And so I think it's very important to get this kind of treatment, because if you're lucky enough to get out and you're left untreated, this PTSD can interfere with your ability to have normal, healthy sexual relations with a partner in the future or in the present. It'll interfere with self-esteem issues, ability to concentrate, and even the ability to form any kind of healthy relationship, whether it be a sexual one or a friendship one, because the trust is busted. So whether it's a situation of you being a parent or you being a victim, or if any one of you are listening and you're a predator, if you're a predator, chances are you're not going to get help because you don't care enough to get help. But just remember that the reason you don't care enough to get help is because you've been so injured that you're literally paralyzed in the empathy department. And that's why people create heinous acts, because there are no feelings. It's like the nerve is cut. There's nothing left. So with that said, I want to move over to Shrink That Tune, and I have a tune here for you by Melanie Martinez called Million Men. Very sad song, very appropriate for this theme. Why she was locked up in a basement filled with men. Should have gone to school. Instead, she did them. Don't touch me, I'm fragile. I'm bitter in my heart. Mama sold me for candy, and I was ruined from the start. So this speaks to the grooming by the family of origin. So here she is already being violated by her own mama. Why do you have to sell me to those mean old men? They cut me up in places I don't even understand. So I think that's referring to breaking boundaries, penetrating her. It's normalcy to me, but how will my friends understand? So this is her life now. This is the bar that the family has set. I'm 5 years old. Wow, that's an intense song. Sleeping with a million men. So here's the grooming already. All grown up and her body has decayed, all those promiscuous games she had to play. Oh, she skipped the jungle gym phase. Of course, no development, no ability to develop and play. She had no childhood. She's trying to look at things in a bright way. She sees the light peeking through the end of the hallway. No, she's trying to escape. Because in her world, there's very little light, if any. I'm running for force, dear. It's harder when you're bones. I'm weak-kneed, but I'm flying out of this hellhole. So I guess she's older now. Why do you have to sell me to these mean old men? They cut me up in places I don't even understand. It's normalcy to me, but how will my friends understand? I'm 10 years old, running from a million men. So you could see that this is incessant. First she's 5, and then she's 10, and she's still in this double dungeon of darkness. Angels swooped down and grabbed me, and now I'm safe away from the million men who raised me. Why do you have to sell me to these mean old men? They cut me up in places I don't understand. And this normalcy thing. Now I'm 17. How will my boyfriend understand with a history of a million men? A million men. This is the trap. They don't seem to have any exit from this dungeon of darkness, which starts in childhood and then perpetuates and sometimes goes into a very, very horrific system gone wrong. So again, reminding you, for those of you who want to heal from your childhood wounds and any repercussions of complex PTSD, any kind of system gone wrong, family system gone wrong, please remember that the Mind Map video series is out. And if you could please put that up so people could see it. Thank you. And you can also do this Mind Map video system with the assistance of a therapist or life coach. And I look forward to continuing this theme of healing human disconnect. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week. Good night, everybody.